So it's pretty crazy that it's already been 6 months since the PSVR 2 launched, and the reception has been a little bit all over the place. So I wanted to give my take on the last 6 months of experience with the PSVR 2 and maybe help someone out there who hasn't got to try it yet make a informed purchase decision and see if it's kind of right for them. Also, if this video helps you and you decide you want to get your very own PSVR 2, I have an affiliate link from Amazon in the description down below. So let's start out with easily one of the biggest generational improvements over the PSVR 1, and that is the initial setup and process of putting this thing together. Anyone familiar with the original PSVR knows what a hassle it was and how easily it could become a mess of cords. Not anymore though, because even though it was controversial for it to have a wire at all, it's as close to plug and play as you can possibly get for a VR headset. Simply make sure your lights are on, clear play space, and plug in the single USB-C cable into the front of your PS5. The system will then go through an update process to get you all your latest post-launch improvements, and after going through a simple step-by-step guided setup, you're ready to play. On all your following game sessions, you'll just have to power on the headset and you can be back in your games in just a few seconds. Now, occasionally the system may ask you to rescan the play area if you made any changes that it notices, but this just takes a few moments and it keeps your personal items and your body safe from getting any sort of damage. Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's my opinion that this is just one of the easiest systems to hop in and enjoy. I really think the only ease of use issue could be that it's a little bit hard to find that sweet spot. Be mature. So the sweet spot is where your eyes and the lenses match up the best to create a really crystal clear, non-blurry image. And this is custom to every person because we each have our own beautiful and unique faces that has different shapes of eyes and distances, so it's gonna be different for everyone. And since you're looking at a light source through curved glass, it can distort the image and create a blur or rainbow-like effect, sometimes called chromatic aberration. Now, basically, if you struggle with this or you see people saying that the PSVR 2 is blurry, it's honestly probably because they haven't quite found the sweet spot that works for them yet. While it is harder to get that perfect sweet spot on PSVR 2 when compared to the Quest, it ultimately allows for more accessibility because you can really fine-tune the diopter to work with your eyes. So I'll be straight up with you, the PSVR 2 is pretty locked off as far as not being able to use it with really anything but the PS5. Some people call this a walled garden. It's not compatible at all with PC, although I wouldn't put it past modders to one day crack the code if Sony never officially natively supports it. And even 6 months in, the hacking community has made some progress forward with this. With that said though, it's really not all doom and gloom since PlayStation Online service and user experience has just gotten much better throughout the years. I mean, literally the PS5 itself is an awesome console with loads to offer. Another benefit of the PlayStation ecosystem is if you do own games from the PSVR 1, there is a chance that it's gotten an upgrade to PSVR 2, either for free or just a very small upgrade fee. And this is just an added bonus. Now, because of it being locked down to PS5 hardware, there's really not much to say about the ecosystem. Essentially, if you've used PlayStation 5, you know what it's like, and you're either gonna like it or not. There's not really an in-between. The PSVR 2 is not gonna change that for you. Now, what this lockdown does mean is that we only currently have the one configuration of hardware that Sony provides for us. And this means that this very specific hardware configuration is going to be what powers all of the PSVR 2 experiences and ultimately determine how they look and run. And because of this, I did want to touch on graphical fidelity a little bit. Honestly, most games that developer took time and made high quality assets for end up translating fantastically on the OLED display. A standout experience is Kayak VR Mirage. This game literally looks borderline identical to a much more costly PC. Also, with it being an OLED screen, horror games can feel super dark with true blacks, and likewise games like Horizon can look remarkably bright with super vibrant colors. Not to mention, Horizon is a great example of how so many elements can come together and form an amazing graphical showcase. The post-processing effects from lights, weather, dust, and other particles looks breathtaking. combined with a great looking and detailed world, it really just sells the entire experience and immersion. Now, they marketed this thing as being a native 4K resolution, and that is true because the OLED panels inside the headset do make up that resolution when combined. However, as with any actual games and gameplay, the internal rendering resolution can vary quite a bit from that actual display resolution. If you ever need more clarity on this, just go watch a few Digital Foundry videos and you'll quickly understand what I mean by this. So while some games come across crisp and sharp, that doesn't always mean that the actual level of detail is going to match that. And this is where I do wish developers would start implementing more options in the graphical settings similar to PC. But the craziest thing is that this is truly just the start of VR graphics on PlayStation VR 2. For example, two of the best looking games, Horizon and Hubris, are still running on Unreal Engine 4, which doesn't even have the Lumen or Nanite systems, which have recently been made VR compatible with Unreal Engine 5. Now, I know that that can sound like a lot of technical jargon, but ultimately all you really need to know is that once Unreal Engine 5 really starts being utilized in VR games, they're most likely going to look and run extremely better than they do right now. And as Unity kind of catches up with these technologies as well, or makes their competition to them, I mean, essentially it's just going to make for much better VR games in the long run. But I will be going into my thoughts on the future of PSVR 2 later on. So for now, let's look at the games that we can currently play and the experiences that we've had since launch. Now, of course, I cannot speak on every single game that's on the platform currently because there's just too many to cover, but I did want to take just a little bit of time to tell you some of my personal recommendations for different genres. Gran Turismo 7 is a great choice for racing fans. For sports fans, you might like to try Creed 2 or VR Football Unleashed. Your action-packed summer blockbuster with climbing and different kinds of shooting mechanics to boot are Horizon and Hubris. The horror fans out there have their awesome games like Resident Evil Village, fully playable in VR, or your more dreamy-like Silent Hill experience in Oregon Quarter. Plus a ton more. If simulation, strategy, or God games are more your jam, we have Cities VR, Demio, and Townsman VR. Or if you're just a fan of the good old classic FPS, we have the online majesty of Pavlov. We have the single-player narrative epic with Star Wars. Or if you like those modern roguelike experience, we have the most amazing Synapse. You also have an amazing variety of rhythm games, hypnotic chill experiences, and puzzlers, even an MMO and esports game. Now listen, I could go on and on like Oliver Tree, but I think you get the idea at this point. Personally, I've had an insane amount of playtime and enjoyment out of the entire catalog that I own. What really shines through though is the handful of exclusive experiences like Horizon, Gran Turismo 7, Resident Evil Village, and most recently Synapse. Every single one of these are really hallmarks for the system that have a great amount of content, or at least a certain level of replayability, along with just this very high budget presentation. All of these titles are really that next generation or AAA VR experience that so many people are looking for, especially the ones that have experienced Half-Life Alyx and been waiting for something at that caliber since. But no matter if a game is exclusive or on other VR platforms, there is just so many great games from developers both big or small, and even though not every game is a massive winner, there is literally something for anyone out there. Even though many of these games can be experienced on other VR platforms like Quest 2, the PSVR 2 brings along with it a few major technical upgrades that you really only find on insanely high-end and expensive VR headsets that only work on equally expensive gaming PCs. However, every piece of amazing technology does come with some kind of failure points in manufacturing or just bugs in general within the software and hardware. But the question is, how does the company respond and handle these issues? So first I'm going to go into my personal issues with PSVR 2, and then I'm going to talk about anecdotal reports from online sources. So I've generally had a very good experience so far with PSVR 2. I haven't had any sort of major hardware failure or defective items. However, I did suffer from that well-reported issue of the left sense controller having tracking problems. Now, even though this entire experience may sound catastrophic and and terrible, it really actually wasn't that bad, because most consumer headsets in this price range will lose its tracking from time to time on the controllers, and it will just snap right back. But with PSVR 2, it did seem like it would happen in a higher frequency than, say, what I've had with the Quest 2. Now, of course, this was especially annoying when I was playing online games like Pavlov, but it did start happening like way less in frequency as the months went on. And I honestly don't know if it's because they pushed some sort of software update to mediate the issue, but it really now is within what I would call that standard of inside-out tracking, where both controllers lose tracking every once in a while, but it's the exact same as my experience with the Quest 2 at this point. So they must have done something to mitigate the problem. Now, even though this is the only major problem that I personally have experienced, there are many people out there who have had a very different and worse experience. These are the horror stories of PSVR 2 issues. MURA. The fragile and built-in cord breaking due to your stupidity. The charging dock melting controllers. Foveated rendering being botched. Legitimate dead pixels upon using your headset for the first time. The sound switching from your headset to your TV to your AirPods to any other Bluetooth connected device that's in your house, and there's many of them, believe me, Big Brother's watching. Okay, to be fair, the MURA issue is a persistent issue among many VR headsets, but I guess it's kind of up to you on how bad it actually appears or looks. For me, I see the little visual snow, if you know what I'm saying, but it's not super distracting, especially once you start playing for longer periods of time. And I don't know, I think that this is more one that people just like to complain about. I mean, yeah, that one's a pretty big oof. I have the charging docks, and there's been like times where they've sat on there for a week without usage because I'm busy with work or whatever, and it hasn't melted on me yet. I haven't really been that concerned about it. Now, the foveated rendering, I think that was just like a software bug when the headset first launched, and I only really think I experienced it in Townsman VR, but maybe in all honesty, it was just because I heard about it and I became like WebMD when it came to PSVR 2 issues, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with mine? But, kind of a little bit of hypochondria, anxiety. I take medicine for that now, it's all good, but you get the idea. It's really nothing to be worried about, some of these software/random issues. Now, dead pixels, on the other hand, that one, we have to draw a little line in the sand and say that that's not okay, Sony. But yeah, I wouldn't get too worried or scared about any of these kinds of issues, because out of the box it should work, and if it doesn't, you always have that manufacturer warranty. If you get it through Amazon, they have a super good return policy. But if you are worried about it and you do end up getting it through Amazon, whether it's through my link or not, I'm just joking about all the affiliate stuff. I mean, it's in the description, so if you do want to support the channel, I would love it, but you get what I'm saying. You can get an additional 3-year warranty for, I think, like $65. I mean, that's pretty good for accidental protection. It just makes it super easy to protect your investment into the future, which also brings us to what I wanted to talk about next, which is, what is the future of the PSVR 2? Now, I need you to remember that most everything that I've mentioned in this video is my own opinion, but really this entire next section is absolutely my opinion and what I think is going to happen. With all that said, I believe the future of the headset relies heavily on a few key factors, and I'll be honest, I'm both excited and a little bit nervous about it overall. Alright, let's be real here. The PSVR 2 really is mainly for gaming mostly, and as such, it will live and die on the experiences that it can provide. Now, we have seen a really great initial offering from Sony directly with Horizon Call of the Mountain and the full VR implementation into Gran Turismo 7. We also have a lot of good support with third-party companies like Capcom, and it seems that we will keep getting some really robust games from them and that feel right at home on PlayStation. Not to mention the slew of remakes, re-releases, ports, and just overall amazing third-party support from VR developers of all different sizes. I mean, so far we have a lot of content, and honestly, it's a lot of good content, some of which you can only find on this platform. With that all said though, I severely think that Sony themselves needs to be more forthcoming about its future first-party games on this headset. And I say this as someone who bought in early, and I think many people are in the same boat where we're eagerly anticipating Sony to drop some surprise or at least give us a roadmap on games that they plan on coming to this headset. I'm just sad to say that 6 months in and we still haven't had any confirmations of other Sony IPs coming to PSVR 2. And what's sad is this doesn't even need to be like massive games like God of War or The Last of Us. It could simply be sequels to franchises that they established on the original PSVR 1. Like if they announce sequels to Astro Bot, Blood and Truth, or Farpoint, I really think it would mean a lot to fans of the originals, and it'd give probably an opportunity for them to re-release those games for PSVR 2 and bring a whole new audience in. But yeah, I mean, I believe the amount of people that Sony's leaving on the table potentially for not bringing their really big IPs into VR could potentially be like massive. I mean, some of my best friends love franchises like Ratchet and Clank, Uncharted, and Spider-Man obviously has been hugely successful in the last few years, all of which have mass appeal and carry an age rating essentially for anyone old enough to use VR. And Insomniac Studios has even made some really banger VR games for Oculus in the past, so I'd really like to see Sony open up resources for these AAA devs to start making VR games. Along with that, I think it'd be awesome if Sony really started having a foot in making it easier for smaller developers to get their PC games onto PSVR 2. I mean, overall, yeah, I'm optimistic that we will keep getting some really great third-party content for years to come, literally just like the original PSVR, but I can't help but balance this optimism with a just hint of anxious skepticism on Sony's commitment to making AAA VR games. Also, they severely need to go like Harpoon Gabe and get Half-Life Alyx running on this thing, because holy crap, that game should be on PlayStation 5, or at least I feel like it should. Alright, so the burning question at the end of the day is, who is the PSVR 2 really for, and is it worth it? However, to answer these questions, you have to ask yourself a few first. And, primarily, what do you want out of a VR experience and headset? I mean, do you already own a PlayStation 5, or if you got PSVR 2, would you have to invest another $500 into a console? And also, what exclusives do you want to have access to the most? Now, I could give you some long, drawn-out explanation with pros and cons between the differences of headsets and maybe what you'd want to do, but ultimately, you know your situation the best. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my overall feelings of the headset, how much I've enjoyed it, and depending on how you answered those last few questions, you'll kind of see if the PSVR 2 is right for you. And yeah, I mean, I've had an insane amount of fun with PSVR 2, so yes, for me, it's absolutely been worth it overall. I've been able to play a tremendous amount of content and some of the best exclusives out there. Sony is really pushing that bar forward for what is expected from VR games and how the technology in the PSVR 2 is leveraged to immerse you in that game. At this point, I'm pretty experienced with virtual reality. My first VR headset was the original PSVR, and I eventually graduated to the Quest 2 and then started doing high-end PC VR. But the PSVR 2 still captivates me literally all of the time. And no, the PSVR 2 isn't as high fidelity as PC VR, but it makes up for it greatly in its cost and just immersive technology for me. I mean, yeah, the PSVR 2 isn't as high fidelity and graphically amazing as PC VR, but it really makes up for it greatly in both its cost and immersion. To me, the technology really just takes the cake. I mean, it has adaptive triggers that give just super nuanced gameplay with light squeezes, full-on squeezes. I mean, there's haptics all over the controller and headset, so you can really touch and feel things in the game world, and it just has a sense of presence to it that is unlike anything I've experienced in VR yet. And of course, I think the most interesting technology that they included in this is the eye tracking. For me, it really beats anything else on the market for like just crazy immersive elements into gameplay and everything. I mean, recently I've been playing a ton of Synapse, and that is just an awe-inspiring, almost, next-gen game as far as gameplay is concerned. Every single moment I'm in there, it just feels so natural. It feels like you have this actual extension of your ability to have telekinesis, and it's amazing. I don't even know how else to say it. I literally get kind of awestruck in how cool it feels to play that game and to use your eyes as a literal gameplay mechanic. It's so different and unique to any other headset out there. I mean, yes, I do know that this technology exists on PC, but it is prohibitively expensive for most people, whereas the PSVR 2, it's a $500 headset that includes all this stuff. And yeah, you need a PS5, but at this point, the way PS5 is selling, I think that most people who are even interested in PSVR 2 probably already know that it requires the PS5. They probably already have a PS5. And, really, I see it all the time, whether it's on Twitter, YouTube comments, or, my latest social addiction has been Threads. People who are new or skeptical about VR are completely blown away when they get their hands on a PSVR 2. I just really don't think there's any beating the amount of tech that's packed into this thing. And no matter what you think it's going to be like, yeah, it might not live up to your expectations initially, but as you get into the game and you start playing and getting immersed, like any kind of doubt melts away and you become the game. I mean, it's so cool every single time I pick this thing up to use it. I will remind you though, it's not without its shortcomings. I still do really want to see more of these AAA first-party Sony experiences and content at least revealed to be coming to the platform. And it is kind of, that walled garden without access to some of the most popular social apps and no real defining theater or home environment. And it's all currently locked to PS5 hardware. With all that said, though, these just aren't things that I myself personally care about. I mean, I have way too much social anxiety to play VR chat effectively, and I don't personally spend tons of time in my Quest 2 hub area home environment. And while I like the idea of VR computing concepts that have been presented by Apple, or the social web 3.0 stuff that Meta is all about, for me, VR really is more than anything about gaming. And I think that a gaming brand like PlayStation has that same mentality in mind. But everyone does want and value different things though, so if you care more about those things, there's obviously a better option out there than PSVR 2. But when it comes to gaming, this thing, yeah, it's pretty amazing. But this is just my takeaway and personal reflection after 6 months with the PlayStation VR 2. And I really hope that this video helped someone out there decide if the PSVR 2 is something that they want to invest money in. Regardless though, I'd love to hear your opinions on if you're going to buy the PSVR 2, through my affiliate link. But in all seriousness, how do you feel about it? Are you planning on getting one? Do you already have one, and how much do you enjoy it? I'd love to hear your answers though in the comments section. It'll be right past that like button. And if you found this video useful, or you just really love VR, maybe check out my other VR content that's popping up on screen right now. But until then, I will see you in the future.